Okay, so can I begin by going through the panel and asking Eddie Hawks first. In general, what's the challenge, Eddie, as you read it now, for this sector in this time?
Well, I think you can't really comment on the Irish economy without understanding what's happening outside, because what's happening outside is going to have a huge influence on how fast or otherwise we come out. And there is signs of recovery. The most important market is the United States. 21% of the global economy is based on US consumers. Will they come back out spending again? And that's the great unknown. What we've seen so far is companies have cut costs, that's improved profits. So we've seen manufacturing orders up, but we actually haven't seen US consumers coming out spending yet. And we know that when the actual sales revenues of US companies start rising. Now it's been talked up a lot, but the evidence isn't there yet. They're continuing to save because they're broadly the same as ourselves. They have an awful lot of debt which to repair. So, but I think the signs are I'd be on the optimistic side, and I think we're going to see quite a substantial lift in the US economy over the next 12 months or so, and that's going to be. Now I know it's small business people, but it's here, but it's going to have a huge impact because once the big animals in the feeding chain, the multinationals and the big firms start growing their sales revenues, and it filters down into the small business sector. On the local side, my big worry, and I'm delighted that Eamon Ryan's here because I'm sure he'll be taking the message back, is a reversion to the banking market we had about 10 or 15 years ago, which I used to fight almost daily. And that was a banking market that was based on a duopoly, where credit was tight, even though money was available, and it was very, very difficult because competition was so muted. And post-NAM, I think we're going to end up in a banking market unless action is taken, which is going to revert to the type of tradition that we had in the Irish banking market, which was very, very tough, and that's going to need action. But I think that if that action is taken by the government or by the next government, which could be as early as next year, in terms of forcing the banks to open up the tap of credit, then I think that the Irish economy is going to could come out of its difficulties a lot quicker than a lot of us would have believed earlier this year.
Tricia.
Well, I think for the vast majority of small businesses, the biggest challenge is still about survival. People haven't quite moved out of that yet, and I think most companies agree that there is a sense that if you get beyond Christmas, that then there is some light at the end of the tunnel next year. Now that may be just wishful thinking, but I think certainly for most businesses, even though owner-managers are by nature optimistic, and that's the great thing about them, and they've gotten that optimism back, it's still incredibly difficult. And I think there are three things that are preoccupying people. The first is that cash is king, and cash flow really has to remain king. And in this environment, it is so difficult in terms of people delaying payment to each other, the government delaying payment to small businesses, even things like 9 months to get your redundancy rebates while the revenue are breathing down your throat at the same time. All of these things need to be addressed. But I think also in terms of the cost competitiveness piece, it's no surprise that in terms of our dirty dozen problems for small business in terms of costs, the top 6 are government administered charges. And the number one used to always be labour costs, but lo and behold, in times of tough, employers can negotiate with their staff, they can negotiate pay decreases, but you can't negotiate with your local authority not to pay your rates, you can't negotiate with the ESB not to pay your ESB bills, or gosh, or not to fill in that CSO form. So it's all of those things that we really need to tackle in order to help businesses to survive. And I think the other big thing, obviously we have the Lisbon referendum, and yes, it's critically important to that. We have NAM and we need to get that through. But also I think there's a real sense that until we get the third thing right, the budget of Christmas, and from a small business perspective, I think people really feel that consumers won't have confidence to come back and spend until they know exactly what the tax is going to be, until they have confidence that the deficit will be really addressed through expenditure cuts, not through more taxation. And that there's a lot of potential investment, and people still have money. It's not like all the wealth has disappeared, but a lot of potential investment won't actually take place until those three things are over. So we are in a bit of a stalemate even for those people who do have money at the moment. So I think in practical terms, in terms of the conversations we have with our members every day, it's also about dealing with your staff in terms of you know, if you've let people go, that's been difficult. But how do you motivate the ones that are left behind, who are still afraid, who still need to actually know that there's going to be a business and a job for them to go to? And those are the practical sort of issues that people are tackling day on day. And I think now, coming into the autumn, the other big thing is that people are just looking for opportunities and trying to become more creative in terms of their markets, in terms of their approach. But because it's such a difficult market and competitors are rife, and obviously the bigger companies are going down terms and conditions, it's certainly not easy, and there are many challenges, I would still say, around.
Robbie.
Hello everybody, nice to be here in Fingal today. And it's, I'm glad I've had the opportunity finally to have the great cappuccino debate with Ben Dunn. I'm sure we'll get to that later. You know, when you talk about challenges, I run a business called Insomnia. We've got 50 shops, many of them are in this borough. And my biggest challenge is offering value to our customers, because value is now, it's now essential. If you're not offering value, you're not going to stay in business. And I believe we're offering real value. And in order to offer that value, I need to lower my costs. And my biggest costs relative to my business are my property costs, i.e. my rents and my landlord costs. Rates are secondary, but they're still a direct property cost. And I've tried, and I've spent the last 6 months going around to my landlords, renegotiating. And you know, when you've signed on for a 25-year lease, which is a legal commitment, you don't hold all the cards. So for me, getting my property costs down, if I'm to offer any coffee, any sandwich for €5, when it used to be $7.20, I've got to get my costs down. So that's my biggest challenge. And another challenge that I have is remaining positive.
Just still saying on that, rent reviews by law, which seems extraordinary, can only go upwards. I mean, that was an error in the drafting of the legislation.
Correct, but it's here now and we have to deal with it, John.
Yeah.
You know, but I actually think that, you know, the whole impetus of what's happening now is actually going to take care of that. I think that it's no longer sustainable to have upward, and you may see them on paper, but in reality there'll be 2-year abatements, there'll be all sorts of stuff done off the lease, and that's effectively what's happening in the marketplace. And people won't talk about that because landlords ask them to, any deal that they've done to remain confidential, you know, and it's not in the landlord's interest to have public debate on that, because
but it's not that it's illegal, but it lacks the protection of law. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
So, and you know, that's my biggest challenge. The other great challenge that I have is that, you know, as people lose their job, they're my customers, and you know, it saddens me to see unemployment going the way it is, because they are all my customers, and the more unemployment worsens in this country, the tougher it's going to be for my business. So I put them up as my 2 serious challenges.
Ben.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Just one bit of advice, Bobby. We're in the middle of this recession, and I'm not so sure if insomnia is a great name for it.
But Ben, you can pronounce it. You can pronounce it if you're Greek or if you're.
Well, I'm usually in the Irish recession context.
Yeah,
But no, seriously, and the reason I think it's important, we're in these tough times, and no matter how tough they are, you must always see the funny side. I want to stress that to everybody, because I've seen some very sad, tragic situations over this last year or two, and people can do extraordinary, terrible things to themselves because they get too hooked on money, get short of money. Now, we're in this recession, and it's a cycle, and usually 70 to 80% of businesses survive recessions. Usually, new businesses spring up in recessions. The only advice that I would be giving the people in this room here is to make sure that you're part of the 70%, that you're the people who can get through the recession.